Hi, I'm Austin Wintory, and I get a lot of questions of all nature on this channel, and I thought it could be interesting to create a recurring series going ahead of just straight ahead Q&A, but instead of trying to find these comments and answer them one-on-one, I could take the ones that I think probably have the widest appeal or the widest applicability and aggregate them into a single video. To that end, any questions in the comments on this video can be fodder for future of these. So feel free to leave your questions below. It's okay if they're technical. It's okay if they're specific or general, or I don't care. This will be the place that I look for the questions for future videos. So that said, there's three I want to focus on today. The first, I'm probably going to answer variations on this a bunch of times going forward because I always want to try to be really helpful, and I get variations on this question all the time, which is fundamentally, as a composer just starting out at the business, high school age maybe, just starting to look towards where do I want to go? Do I want to go to university? Do I want to, move to one of the cities like Los Angeles or New York or San Francisco or Seattle or London or wherever? What should I do? Or those who are just coming out of university or shifting gears in life, whatever the case, wherever you are, that starting position is defined for you. I get questions all the time about when at that position, what are the resources I can turn to arm myself for success? So I thought I'd just give a quick and dirty rundown. This is a bit off the cuff, so I'm sure I'm going to think of 50 more things as soon as I stop recording, but hopefully here is a decent list of places to start. So first off, you're here on this channel. My hope very much is that the content between the as noted videos, the behind the scenes content, that sort of thing, videos like this, that you find a valuable resource that you can use to get what you need to get started, or at least to get one avenue. Another channel I really want to recommend is from a colleague and friend of mine named Ann Dern, whose channel is linked below. She is a composer of great talent, a composer who has a very kind of meticulous way of thinking about these things and has been generating a lot of really useful videos. And as I look through the comments on there, I just see an outpouring of love from younger composers saying this is so useful. And she covers so many subjects, from basics on the compositional side, orchestration, working with a team, and then all manner of subjects on the business, like what do agents do? What do managers and lawyers? How do they figure in? How do you negotiate with producers? On and on and on and on. It's a gold mine, to be honest, and she deserves all the subscribers. I've also occasionally seen her post videos where I thought, I actually might disagree with that a little bit, and thought it could be fun to do a little back and forth with her over some potentially quibbling, nitpicky type disagreements about some of the subtleties. Which would just be in the spirit of fun and the interest of trying to find the best answers to these questions. So check out her channel, a gold mine of information. For those of you specifically interested in games and game scoring, first off, I always recommend to everybody join the Game Audio Network Guild, or Audio Gang. Again, links below. They do seminars and webinars, and when the world finds its way back to this, in-person events, there's hubs of things like the Game Developers Conference and Game SoundCon, innumerable valuable resources. Plus, it's a way to foster community in the game audio world. Even just using Twitter with the hashtags of, game audio or VGM, video game music, you'll find other colleagues, future collaborators potentially, all trying to find each other that way. And of course, there are innumerable Facebook forums and even Reddit, subreddits, that sort of thing. So embrace the online world with Gang as a very valuable spear point. If your interest is beyond just video games and it also includes film and TV, I highly recommend the Society of Composers and Lyricists. Technically an international organization, although the majority of the members are here in Los Angeles. They do a lot of really wonderful events and give you access to all manner of valuable resources. So, Game Audio Network Guild and the SEL, the Society of Composer and Lyricists. I also recommend subscribing to GDC's YouTube channel. They used to be very strong sticklers about only making past talks available to GDC Vault members, which is a fairly expensive thing. And obviously the vast majority of the talks are still found there, but they've released a lot on YouTube. And honestly, it is a goldmine. You just must spend time watching those. If you have any interest in games, you need to learn more than just what's in the game audio side of things. So go study what is on the GDC YouTube catalog. You'll find it infinitely valuable. Similarly, there are wonderful channels like the Game Maker's Toolkit that do video game analysis and kind of video essay format on taking a look at various aspects of game. I've left recommendations to some of my favorites in the links below. And just to cap off in terms of resources, yes, of course, there are books, Vincent Persichetti's book on 20th Century Harmony, or the Bladder or Sam Adler books on orchestration, or Walter Piston's or Rimsky-Korsakov's, et cetera, et cetera. These are all well and good. But honestly, YouTube contains so much information. Similarly, and related to that question is, should I even go to university? Should that be a thing? And I'm going to be real honest. I went to two magnificent universities, NYU and USC, but I don't know that I can just make a blanket statement that that's for everybody. Those programs were well suited to me. I was also going in the hopes of meeting young filmmakers and game designers and things like that, and I got lucky that I managed to meet people like that. But there's no guarantee of that, and it's also, there's a time commitment involved. There's a stress involved for a lot of reasons, not least of which is financial. There's financial aid, some people have family that are willing to help pay for it, and obviously there's scholarships and that sort of thing. But it really needs to be looked at critically and given a kind of cost-benefit analysis, because I've met lots of composers, and I meet them more every day, who did not walk that path and for whom it represents absolutely no barrier. It is not required. So I will fully acknowledge that I got a lot out of pursuing the university path, but I don't just automatically recommend it, because if I was starting over today, I'd honestly probably just skip it. I think probably right out of high school, I would have just moved to LA and just tried to get started. I don't know if that would have been the better choice, but that's where I am emotionally and with my kind of personal sense of urgency that I feel today. And if that's you, don't be afraid. It is scary, but just embrace it. Hopefully in there is the beginnings of a comprehensive list on good resources for those starting out. I'm going to leave more in the description below amongst all the links as I think of them. And hopefully it's something that is useful. Feel free in the comments, of course, to recommend other resources that have inspired you. I may discover things I don't know about, and I'll happily roll those into the description as well. There's two other questions I wanted to address while I'm here. The first one came during, I was doing a live streamed event with the phenomenal luminary game designer Ken Levine. And one of the questions that came up I thought was worth just offering some 2 cents on. So I'm going to read the question. The complexity and vision in your work speaks for itself, and I believe that sometimes you might be challenged to tune it down for either your client or the audience. So how much do you hold yourself back in order to kind of give people what they want, or how much of your craziness do you have to sacrifice in order to get the job done? I thought that was actually a really good question, and one that doesn't come up very often. Do I find myself holding back my ideas for the sake of either director or producer approvals, or maybe even a belief that the audience just won't get it, that it's a little too opaque or a little too obfuscatory of the main goal that we're after? And I honestly would say occasionally, I would say 75% of the time, if I'm holding things back, it is under the direction of my collaborators. So a director might say, I think this is interesting, and I really like the melody at the heart of it, but there's too much going on around that melody. Can we sort of clear away the underbrush? It's also, especially when you're younger, very tempting to constantly overwrite things, because you'll spend a day on 5 seconds of music. So you want to make that 5 seconds of music really amazing, but you forget that it goes by like that. There's your 5 seconds. The audience had that in their life for that amount of time. You spent a day or a week or a year writing that 5 seconds. So it's very, very, very tempting and easy to end up overwriting it. And don't do that. Simplicity is virtuous. Simplicity is actually difficult. Elegance. that's a whole other tangent that I could spin off on, but I'm going to leave it there for the moment. The salient point being that I value my collaborators saying, let's reel this in a little bit. Don't forget, the audience is hearing this for the first time. Go easy on them. It's not dumbing it down. It's making sure that your intent isn't getting lost. So I would say that pretty often I find myself simplifying things or whittling them down or finding a clearer and better way to express it. And 75% of the time, it's because the director is catching me before I fall and helping me find a way to do that. And 25% of the time, it's me looking at it and taking a step back and kind of objectively, freshly listening like the next morning, or I take a walk and listen through my cell phone where I'm kind of distracted by the birds and the bees and the nice sky and a plane flying overhead and this person driving down the street or whatever. And I'm listening through a subpar device like, a simple phone speaker. And that combination of variables kind of lets me hear it through a little bit more of an objective lens, as though I'm hearing it for the first time. And I'll realize, oh man, that melody kind of wanders at 30 seconds. I'll get usually I keep sticky notes here where I say, at 47 seconds, it feels like it's drifting off and it loses focus. And I need to step outside myself in order to hear that. So collaborators are the best at finding this sort of thing, but if you develop these sorts of techniques, you can find them yourselves. So in summary, yes, I constantly walk it back, but it's never, ever, ever because I think the audience is stupid or because I think that my collaborators, like a director or a producer or somebody like that, is stupid. It's never that. It's that sometimes you think people are in your head more than they are, and they simply are not. And you owe it to them as a listener, at least if your goal is to communicate effectively, to make it easy to get inside your head, or even better, to get outside of your head and meet them where they are. A kind of related question came in the form of a YouTube comment where somebody wrote, and I'm just going to read it. I'd be curious to know how often it's the case that a composer knows early on in their creative process that they're working on either a huge success to be or a flop, a complete flop. Is there ever the notion to hold back a little when scoring, because why get ambitious if you're not looking at a hit? Or is there an urge to go in on something regardless because the story inspires them enough? Though I suppose it makes more sense for it to be the case that a lot of composers are grateful to be hired for a project at all. Surely only a select handful of composers can be extremely picky about gigs. So there's a few questions sort of compiled in one. First thing, this made me remember a great interview from, I think it's the mid to late 80s, of Andre Previn, luminary conductor and composer, having a conversation with John Williams. And John Williams explicitly says in the interview, I am trying to always look for hits. I don't want to score a thing and put all this effort and energy into it if I don't think anybody is going to end up seeing it.
I'm at a very happy point in my career where I can say no to a film.
Do you say no because I haven't got the time, or do you say no, I don't like it?
Oh, both of those. And I'll be honest with you, for the sake of this interview, completely candid. I say no because I think it will not be successful. I want to do a film that I like, but I also want to do, if I don't want, I don't want to practice. I want to have something that people will see and hear.
Now, what I think is baked into the premise of his response is, I can't resist giving it everything I've got as a professional, as a perfectionist, as a moral human being who's taking somebody's money. I'm not going to phone it in, ever. So I better be picky about what I'm choosing, because if I pour all my blood and sweat and tears into something and then nobody ends up seeing it, it was potentially kind of a waste. I have a slightly different philosophy from that, although I do recognize that that's a great way to be. And you obviously cannot argue with the career of John Williams. But that said, as is often well established on this channel for any recurring viewers, I am a diehard and lifelong fan of Jerry Goldsmith, who scored many, many, many non-hits, including a bunch of just outright crappy films. And I think of that as constantly returning to the gym musically, as it were. We are engaging our creative muscles every time we put pen to paper or sit at our keyboard or our DAW or in front of a microphone or whatever your process. And I think there's merit to constantly using that muscle. You know, some of the great composers, even Beethoven, wrote piles and piles and piles of music that are not the Fifth Symphony, the Ninth Symphony, etc., etc., the greatest hits that we remember them for. Even John Williams, for all of his, I don't want to say grandstanding, but for his statement that he really only likes to work on hits, he scored a lot of things that you've never heard of either. In fact, I suspect that would make for an excellent You Gotta Hear This with Troy in the future. Noted. I haven't even gotten to the idea of if you're able to even guess in advance if something is going to be a hit. We'll get to that in a moment. But in short, or in summary, I do think that there is merit in just showing up to work every day and trying to be a better composer than you were yesterday. And whether you have a brilliant project in front of you that's a catalyst for that, or something that you think, look, I'm going to do my best to try to help this and to make it all that it can be. But knowing that the music is not going to make, a great game or a great film into this masterpiece, or even a decent one into a great one, et cetera, et cetera. There's only so much influence we can have. As Troy is often fond of saying, if it's rubbish, be the best rubbish in it. There's truth to that. There's merit. There's a laudable philosophy there. I can't make this film a masterpiece, but I can make the score the best part of it. And I don't think that that's necessarily condescending to the rest of it. It might be a kind of brute realism, or a kind of a blunt assessment that you would be well served to keep to yourself. But if you're looking at it and just asking yourself honestly, is this a great work of art? And you think, well, probably not. You still owe it giving it everything you've got. So a quick and dirtier way of answering this is, I don't think it's really that easy to guess if things are going to be a hit. Sometimes you look and you just think it's amazing and it just speaks to you, and they still don't find an audience. A good example of this that it sort of pains me to invoke was a wonderful, beautiful game I did called Pode, which was well received, and it found players. But I thought it was going to be much, much bigger hit, because the game has a beautiful, innocent, and very stylized sensibility to it from Norwegian developers, and very inspired by Norwegian folk art. And I tried to pay homage to the Norwegian sensibilities in the score as well. But it wasn't some just absolute, game of the year, fantastic hit. But when I wrote the score, I genuinely believed it could be. And I still think it ought to have been. But it didn't quite connect with the audience. So you can predict, you could put all your money on the table for something, and it just doesn't find people. There can also be situations like, honestly, what happened on Journey, where the night before the release, I found myself thinking, look, I have no clue if anyone's going to like this. I don't know. I know that it represents what I want it to be, and I do believe that that game company and our collaborators at Sony all feel confident that we delivered, in the end, after 3 years of struggle, the game that we want to make. But the feeling that therefore the audience will like it, that leap I couldn't make. I genuinely didn't know if the audience was going to say this is uninteresting and be neutral or cold to it, or if they were going to literally hate it and say, this is pretentious. This is, so who do you think you are? What is this, is this a video game, or are you trying to give me, an art lecture, and just roll their eyes at the pretentiousness of it. I was overwhelmed. I remain 9 years later, overwhelmed that they, in droves, seemed to really resonate with our goal and loved it. And it's still kind of surreal to me that was the case. So you can't predict these things, and I think there's no excuse to not be a professional. Sometimes, again, I have to credit Troy for this. We're handed a situation where you say, okay, this is clearly not ideal. The budget is too low for the kind of ambition they have, or we don't have enough time to really do it the way we would like to do it, et cetera, et cetera. There's always going to be a million seemingly compromising variables on the table. So the question you ask yourself is, what can I do to teach myself something new here? What can I do to improve myself? Maybe I'll look at a game and I'll say, I just want to make this really tuneful. I just want to really focus on that melodic muscle. And maybe people will play it. Maybe they won't. Maybe it won't be my best score ever. But I'm going to get something out of this experience that's going to make me even better the next time. And if the next thing that comes along is also a project that you think, no one's really going to see this, you're still going to write a better score than you did the day before. Because my general philosophy is, you don't know when that Star Wars or that Mass Effect or that, I'm not just going to name sci-fis, The Expanse, Star Trek, no, Bastion or Ori and the Blind Forest. You don't know when that might cross your desk. And if you haven't spent all of your opportunities preparing yourself and being the best possible artist or composer that you can be for when that happens, you're not going to be up to the task in the moment. So, summary, always give it your everything. I don't even try to pick winners versus losers as much as John Williams might. because I think there is merit in stepping up to the table every single time. I hope this was interesting. It's a little bit off the cuff, so I feel a little bit looser and messier than normal. I hope that's okay. Really appreciate you sticking around and asking these questions that gave me fodder for posting this. Any questions in the comments below, I will consider as ammo or fuel for future of these, so please leave them. I enjoy this format, and if you do too, we'll make more of them. Thank you very much.